So the mitzvah of tzedaka is to give to the poor specifically. The question is, the mitzvah of maaser, is this specifically for the poor, or is this to give to what we call charitable causes, which is not necessarily restricted to the poor? So before we go and deal with all these questions, let's get a little bit of background. So you have a source sheet, which is, okay, we're going to start with source number 1. If anybody needs some more, there's plenty more sheets over here. Sure.
Thank you. No.
Okay, so the first thing is, when the Torah speaks about giving maaser, what is the Torah speaking about? The Torah is speaking about the mitzvah that's still done in Eretz Yisrael to this day, to give maaser from the fruits. Giving maaser from the fruits, this is an obligation only in Eretz Yisrael and only on produce. It's not in the diaspora, and it's not on other possessions, it's specifically on produce. So that's simply what the mitzvah is talking about. However, we find in the Medrash, which is either in the Sifri or the Medrash Tanchuma, we find this expression. So I'm going to read how the Medrash interprets the pasuk. The Medrash reads the pasuk in source number 1. Aser ta'aser es kol tvuas arecha. One should give a tithe of all produce of your seeds. Hayoytze hasadeh shana shana. That which comes out of the field each year. So each year you should tithe for that year. Says the Medrash, ein li'ela tvuas zarecha shechai b'maiser. It's missing a zayin. Ein li'ela tvuas zarecha shechai b'maiser. I only know from this pasuk that the produce is obligated to tithe. Ribis, what about interest, ufrakmatya, or other profits made from business, from trade, v'chal shar haravachim minayin, and all other profit. How do I know whether I have to give maaser on that? Talmud loymar es kol. The verse could have just said aser ta'aser tvuas zarecha. The verse could have just said give a tithe from the grain, but it said from all the grain. From all the grain is an unnecessary word, and it's really to tell you not just all the grain, but something much more inclusive. All to include all profitable endeavors that a person has. Whatever a person has profit from, a person should give maaser from. So this is how the Medrash of Sifri, which is a Medrash of halacha, right? It's not just like a Medrash of stories, it's a Medrash specifically of halacha. The Medrash halacha on this verse says that actually one is obligated from this pasuk to give maaser on anything, on any kind of interest, on any kind of profit that a person has. Okay, now there are many, many more things that we're going to learn out of this pasuk. But I just want to take a step back and focus on one thing, and that is why or how. The question is, why does Hashem obligate us to do this? And how? It's challenging. It's challenging to tell a person that from all his hard work, he's going to have to give a tenth. Now, I don't know what life used to be like, that everybody who worked hard made much more than their needs. But it seems to be that life is set up in such a way, our economic system is in such a way, that most people work hard, just barely cover their needs. That's the way the economic system seems to work. Right? Again, I'm sure in different countries and different places it's different, right? Where you have the extreme rich and the extreme poor, but in our society, most of the people are in the middle class where they're just getting by, where they're just meeting their needs. Everybody's salary is different, but everybody's needs seem to be different. Everybody seems to be just getting by, covering their lifestyle. In other words, nobody has extra money to spend.
It's interpretation of needs and barely.
And?
Barely. What is barely and what is needs?
Okay, good question. Good question. But that's something that everybody figures out, and it's hard to put a line on it. Okay, so nobody seems to have extra. So what's the idea over here? So first of all, we know with regards to another maaser, there is one kind of maaser which is called maaser behema. Right? Maaser behema, which is that you give if a person has 10 animals in their livestock, in their farm, they should give one to be holy. How would the process work? So it says that the farmer would have to line up all his animals, and he'd let them pass through a door, and he would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and when he came to number 10, he says, "You are holy." Right? He said, why does the Torah say to do it in this way? Why can't the Torah just say, you know how many animals you have, so give 10%, give 10% to the animals? No, the Torah says, let it all go through the door. And by the way, also with produce, the Torah says you have to you have to lead it into the storehouse. If you don't bring it into the storehouse, one is not obligated biblically to give maaser, unless you enter the door, unless you go into the entrance. You can even bring it through a window and have an exemption. The Talmud speaks a lot about all these ways out of maaser that people should not take, but people would be tempted to. So only that which you walk into the door and you account for everything. Why? So the commentaries explain it simple. Because in order for a person to realize that when Hashem is asking you for 10%, He's not really asking you for all that much. How do you realize that? When you realize that really I have nothing. I have nothing, that means I start. And I start counting my animals, and I say, oh, God gave me 1, God gave me 2, God gave me 3, God gave me 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then, oh, number 10, that's I give back to Hashem. Now, instead of just saying, I know what I have, and I'm just going to calculate and give 10%, then it's as if you assume that it's all yours, and you assume that you're doing God a big favor by giving Him 1/10. Instead, the Torah says when you calculate maaser, start as if you have nothing. Because that's really the way life is. Really, we have nothing. And God gives us each thing that we have, so therefore, the whole attitude is different. The whole attitude is different. We say, you know what, He's only asking me for 10%. That's very generous of Him to share the 90 with me. And then we come to another point, which is that Hashem says, not just am I not asking you to share with me something that's really yours, I'm really asking you only to share something that's really mine or really belongs to, so to say, my causes, and that's the poor people and the charitable organizations. Not just that, Hashem gives us reward for it. He says that by giving 10%, you're going to get wealthy. By giving 10%, you're going to get wealthy, you're going to profit. You're not going to lose anything, on the contrary, you're only going to gain. There's a story told in the Medrash about Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, one day, it was after Rosh Hashanah, and you'll figure out in a minute why the Medrash mentions it was after Rosh Hashanah. One day after Rosh Hashanah, the day after, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai pays a visit to his nephews. And he tells his nephews, I want you to make sure that this year you give as much charity as possible. I know times are tough, but I need you to really make an effort this year to give as much charity as possible. If you say, okay, he says, but not just that, I want you to mark down everything that you give. Now you think, why you should mark down? You should just give freely. He says, no, I want you to keep an account of everything that you give. Okay. And so they did. So they scrapped the pennies here and there, and they marked down every little penny that they gave to tzedaka, they marked down. At the end of the year, they had another visitor at their home. This was a messenger from the Roman government saying that they owed a tax of 600 dinar because there was a libel against them that they had done tax evasion. They didn't have enough money to be able to possibly owe that amount of money, and certainly they didn't hide that amount of money from taxes. But there was a libel against them. They owe 600 gold dinar, and they have a choice either to offer that, or their trade was they traded in silk. They would sew garments. So, or you can sew the king the kind of garment that's worth a lot more than 600 dinar. These are your options. Otherwise, you're thrown to prison. They didn't have the money. There was no chance they could pay it. So off to prison they went. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai heard about it, and he immediately set out for the prison and asked for permission to see them in the prison. He asked them, he says, "Did you do what I said, what I instructed you to be careful to give charity?" He said, "Of course." "Did you document it all?" He says, "Yes. We have the document here with us. We carry it where we go." He takes the document, he calculates how much they gave that year. He sees they gave 594 dinar to charity over the year. Reb Shimon says, "Do you by any chance have 6 dinar left?" He said, "Actually, we're tailors. We actually sew into all our garments. We sew some money just in case we're in need somewhere. So we actually have in our garments, we have a few dinars." He opens it up, he says, "I need the 6 dinar." He goes over to one of the ministers and he says, "This is for cover, to cover up. You take this and you exempt them, you write them off, that they're free to go." Sure, a bribe. Yeah. And the families let go. Then Reb Shimon explained to them, he says, "You see the account over here. You gave 594 dinar to tzedaka. You had a decree against you of 600 dinar. He said, I saw this from the beginning of the year. I saw from the beginning of the year that you were going to lose, you were going to have a tax on you of 600 dinar. My advice to you was, instead of giving it to the emperor, give it to charity. Instead of it going to waste, it will be invested in you and be a merit for you forever and ever. So give it to charity." So now you did your best, but there were 600 dinar short, so the decree wasn't completely averted. So I had to take 6 and actually pay off somebody in the government so that the 600 that was meant to be lost against you that year would be covered. And he says, "But not you."
So what it means is, when they gave him the 6, they gave him charity. So Shimon Bar Yochai had 6 gold for charity. He decided with his charity to try to free him from prison. It's also a charity.
Also charity, yeah, that's
He
another.
gave the charity to the boy as bribe in order to take a Jew out of prison.
Yeah, also good
But
point.
he gave it to him not to go on bribe. He gave it to him for charity. And he could have done it with a yeshiva.
That's a good point. Yeah. So, right. So this is what the Torah says. The Torah says that I promise you. Hashem says in this case, I promise you that giving charity is not going to actually cost you. It's only going to add a merit. It's going to be a test. And this is actually a place where you can test Hashem. It says the one place in Torah that the Torah gives permission to test Hashem. Generally, when it comes to reward for mitzvahs, we're never allowed to test Hashem. We're never to say, "You know what, I'm going to put on tefillin today, but you better give me what I want. And otherwise I don't believe in you." With every other mitzvah, we don't have permission. It's a chutzpah, and it's, so to say, only asking for trouble to put that kind of test, generally speaking. Right? But when it comes to the mitzvah of tzedaka, you can say, "Hashem, I'm testing you out on this. I'm giving extra tzedaka. I want to see that it's not going to cost me. I want to see that it's only going to gain." The Torah gives permission. There's some opinion, some rabbis say no, but the accepted opinion is that with this mitzvah, you have full rights to, so to say, put God to the test. Because Hashem promises it's not going to make you lose. Quite the contrary, you're only going to gain more. This is one of the things that we learn from these words in our parsha, in today's Chumash. Aser ta'aser, as you have in source number 1. So I don't have all the sources here in the Talmud that speak about it, but he says, in source number 2, you see, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, Mai diksiv aser ta'aser. What does it mean when it says in our parsha 2 times? It doesn't just say, give maaser. It says, aser ta'aser. Tithe you shall tithe. It says, aser. The first one is written with a sin. Read it as if it's written with a sin. Aser, give a tithe. The second time is with a shin. B'shvil shetis asher. In order that you should become wealthy. Which means you can give it without intent. You can give it with the full intent, not of doing a mitzvah. You can give it with the intent of becoming rich. By the way, in the story of Reb Shimon that I just told you, his nephews asked him at the end, he says, so why didn't you tell us? And we would have given even more. We would have given even more. We would have pushed ourselves even more if we knew we were losing the money anyway. So he said, I wanted you to also have the reward of doing the mitzvah l'shem shamayim. Right? That would give you additional reward. The whole idea was I want to give you a reward that goes with the loss, so to say. Then instead of just loss, you'll have more reward. So this way you got more reward because you did it l'shem shamayim. You did it for the sake of heaven. But even if one doesn't do it for the sake of heaven, even if one does it simply, like we said, to test God. He says, God, you promised, I'm sure it's going to work. And that's his intent. That's also okay. Give for the sake of becoming wealthy. If you want the tested, proven method of becoming wealthy, you can give it that way. Anyway, there's lots more, but I know that the real question that everybody's here for is, okay, so how exactly do we do this calculation? We know it, we're doing it already. How do we do the calculation? So the first question, from a halachic standpoint, that one has to ask, what's the nature of this mitzvah? Is this a full-fledged biblical commandment? Or is this a rabbinical enactment? Or is this a pious custom introduced by Jewish communities for a long time, certainly? But what exactly is this nature of giving specifically this amount, of giving a tenth? The fact that you have to give charity is clearly a biblical mitzvah. And the fact that you have to give charity at every opportunity and never turn somebody down is clearly a biblical mitzvah. That's in this week's parasha clearly. But the question is this idea of giving a tithe. When the Torah speaks about a tithe, it's speaking about produce. And now we say that no, it applies to any income, any profit, is all in the category of tithing. So is this a biblical mitzvah? Because it's learned out of this verse, does that make it biblical or not? Now what's the difference? Generally we say there's no difference between a biblical mitzvah, a rabbinical mitzvah. It's all Hashem's will. Hashem wanted one to be revealed in this time, he wanted another to be revealed in another way. It's all the same thing, it's all God's will, there's no difference. But there is a halachic difference. The halachic difference is that if something is a biblical mitzvah, so then whenever in doubt, you have to take the strict path. If it's a rabbinic mitzvah, you have the permission to take the lenient path. And this is the first thing that we have to consider before we go into the questions of how do we calculate. Right? How do we calculate? All the questions that we have in our head are all things that we see 2 ways to calculate. Let's assume that we have to give 10% of our income. But is this considered income? Is this not considered income? Because I have a loss to count against it. So maybe it's not considered income. Here I have basic expenses. Is that considered profit? Regular working income. If you talk about investments, and investments that then bear profit, okay. But you're talking about working income. That's money that's for my time. And time, it costs money to get through time. You know, you have to have the meal and you have to have the house over your head, right? So I'm being paid for my time, and that time itself costs me, right? It costs me to live. So is that considered income? So there are opinions, and for informative purposes, I try to present more than one opinion in some cases, even though obviously ultimately we want just clarity. We want to know what's the way we should follow. But there are opinions. Actually, the source of this is a very reliable source, the Beis Yosef, who writes in a responsa that one is able to deduct from this maaser, he's able to deduct all regular expenses. All regular expenses can be deducted from maaser. You don't have to give maaser on. That means your rent or mortgage is a regular expense. Your utilities is a regular expense. So all that you don't give. So for example, a person is making, let's throw out a number, he's making $4,000 a month of total income, and he has $2,000 a month for rent, and another $500 a month for utilities, and another $500 a month on automatic groceries, basics, nothing fancy, just basics just to get by. So let's say there's $1,000 which we can play with and think about luxuries and think about a vacation and think about savings or things like that. So on 1,000 you should give 10% maaser accordingly. The Beis Yosef actually gives room for such an approach. That's the approach that's actually mentioned in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's mentioned that you can deduct all expenses. But they mentioned it's only one person who says that, and some people doubt if the Beis Yosef actually wrote that, or maybe it's a typing mistake, because all other opinions say that no, that's not the approach. There is the idea of deducting what we call business expenses. Business expenses, which means you didn't gain any money because you lost. That there is room to deduct. And this can actually be quite broad, and maybe broader than you thought. If somebody's running a business, it's very clear. Let's think of, the best way to think about these questions is let's compare it with CRA. Now, I don't know how much people know about their tax returns, or they just leave it to the accountant and they let the accountant figure it out. But if you think about all the tax exemptions of CRA, so let's compare CRA tax exemptions with maaser, so to say, exemptions. Okay? So what's the biggest CRA tax exemption? Basic amount. Yeah, we start basic amount. Basic amount that CRA doesn't tax, right? Yeah. They set that amount. It's, let's say, about $11,000 per adult. Right? So is there such a thing? So I'll say, according to the Beis Yosef, there is such a thing. There is a basic amount of cost of living, which according to the Beis Yosef, one doesn't have to count. But according to everybody else, besides the Beis Yosef, they say no. There is no such. The maaser is on any income that you make. That's not exempt. Every income is taxable, is maaserable. Right? You should tithe. You shouldn't take a basic amount that's outside of this. Okay, another CRA comparable, or your own personal question. Let's just throw some questions and then we'll try to field them in an order. Anybody wants to throw some more questions? Or I should...
Donations.
What?
Donations are deductible.
Donations...
They are already part of...
Well, so you know what? So let me address that. It sounds very straightforward, right? Of course donations are deductible. That's the maaser. So here's the next question. Next question is, are all causes of charity maaser eligible? Right? What? Are all causes of charity maaser eligible? First question is maaser only for the poor? Specifically for the poor? Or is maaser to support a shul, to support a school, to maybe even to be able to fulfill certain mitzvahs on their ultimate level, to be able to pay the price difference of kosher food? I mean, we can explore many things of noble, so to say, religious causes. So there's personal religious causes, there's communal religious causes. So the first question is maaser strictly for the poor or not? So tzedaka, the mitzvah of tzedaka is for the poor. When it says in the Torah tzedaka, which is the other mitzvah we have in our parsha, tzedaka you fulfill when you give money to the poor. Right, the mitzvah of tzedaka. But the mitzvah of maaser is clear that it's broader than that. It definitely, any religious communal cause is definitely, so it's not just deductible, it's deductible not just from your total income that's taxable, but it is the maaser itself. Meaning whatever you give to a school, to a shul, or likewise, is deductible. But then you have a question, let's say, we'll use, let's say, a CRA question. So let's say it's coming up now, people are buying a seat for high holidays, right? So if you buy membership, which is not mandatory, so to say, you certainly are giving a donation, right? And CRA would recognize it, you get a full tax receipt, no questions asked. What about buying a seat in a shul, for example? I'm using these examples, they're actually relevant, but you can understand broader implications from that. So buying a seat in the shul, I'm buying something of personal benefit. What, I want to stand in the shul instead, the whole davening. Right? So is the seat in the shul, is that giving maaser, is that giving charity or not?
No.
What?
No.
They say, you're not giving charity, you're just buying a need. Yeah. You need to be in shul on Rosh Hashanah. If you want to be able to focus on your prayers, you probably want a seat. So, it's just a personal need. So actually, although you can make the argument that way, but most of the codifiers of law, they say, no, any money that's given to a shul, because it's not mandatory, because the shul said, so you can come in without a seat, right? It's not, let's say, different when we talk about tuition, where you have to pay a certain amount for your kid to come into the school, right? But because the shul has an open door policy, so therefore, really, the only reason why the shul, especially think about it, the only reason why is a Chabad house, right, charging for a seat? Because that's just one way to elicit donations. That's one way to encourage people to give donations. Nobody's really looking at it as a hard charge, as a charge that you really have to pay this and otherwise you're unwelcome. No, it's just a way to encourage, a basic donation you can give. We encourage you to give a higher donation if you can, but at least a basic level of donation, of participation. Right? This is actually giving the whole idea really is to join everybody in supporting the shul. So the whole idea is actually, the basis of the idea is actually giving people a chance to give tzedaka. And therefore, it's absolutely it can absolutely be counted as part of maaser. Even the high holiday season can be counted for maaser.
Can you generalize that any donation that goes to benefit shul is maaser? As
long as it's not a cost that you need just for your personal needs.
But you
meaning to say,
shul, it's
meaning to say, if you let's use relevance. If you buy a pair of tefillin and you happen to buy it from the shul, like let's say you can do it from JRCC, right? That's a personal expense. Even though it's tefillin, it's a personal expense. The Jew has to have a pair of tefillin in order to fulfill the mitzvah properly.
So it's not maaser.
So that's not maaser. That's not, because there you're getting a tangible
but it doesn't fall
thing in return.
It doesn't fall into a category to benefit shul.
Right.
But still the same.
Also doesn't allow her to see.
Right. CRA doesn't.
You get a benefit. You're not allowed to give a receipt. The organization is not allowed to give you a receipt.
Right. Yeah.
What about the mikvah fee?
Mikvah fee?
Yeah.
What? It's maaser.
It is?
It is?
What?
Yeah, because you help the shul
Yeah.
to maintain a mikvah.
But you're buying the membership.
Well,
You're buying the membership.
now the truth is, if you want to be very precise about it, you can divide the portions. You can say, look, if I'm a person who every day I go to the mikveh and I take a shower in the mikveh, that saves me on my water bill at home.
And so,
Okay, and it actually costs. By the way, it costs. In the U.S., they barely pay in water bills. Institutions really pay in water bills. There's no such exemption in Canada, as far as I know, right? They have a heavy water bill because of all the people taking showers. So there is cost involved. So if one wants to be strict on himself, one can say, no, I shouldn't really count that because, or at least I should calculate what amount of savings I'm personally having by by having that shower in the mikveh. Because over here we're not talking about anything. I'm not talking about the spiritual part. I'm not
skip
talking
showering
about
then.
do I need a mikveh and do I need the investment made in the mikveh. I'm talking about strictly what each person who goes in there saves himself and costs the shul.
So it's possible to take most
But
of your...
so the appropriate way would be what?
Don't take showers.
Don't take shots.
To keep anybody quiet.
What?
To keep anybody quiet.
So again, because we do it in a general sense, I would say the general cost is supposed to be a little bit more because also, like especially in Chabad Gate where you go, they don't have a membership charge, so they do charge you a little bit more. This is meant to be also, so to say, a charitable membership. It's meant to also include a charitable membership. So if one wants to be strict, they don't count the full amount. They should estimate how much would be their own personal savings on a physical need, right? Of a daily shower or whatever it is, and count that out. So only a portion, let's say, of it.
Another question: is tzedaka considered to be part of maaser?
Is what?
Tzedaka, the means of tzedaka, it can be counted as a part of maaser or no?
Good question. Actually, one of the explanations given for why the rabbis introduced this idea of giving maaser is in order that people should always be ready to give charity. It means we have another mitzvah in the parsha, which is that when a poor person comes to your door, you should be ready to give him. Now, I can tell you a story that just happened to me today, and was probably at the forefront of my mind because I was preparing this class. I saw this. Somebody came and asked me for a large amount that I would probably, under regular, sane circumstances, I probably would not give. But I realized the person was actually desperate and was a timely need. And I thought to myself, you know what? He actually asked for a loan, but in all probability, it's not going to be paid back, knowing the situation. I said, you know what? Okay, this will be part of my maaser. It's a large amount, but it's an amount which can be. It's not larger than my annual maaser allotment. So this opens up the path in our hearts to never feel bad about giving. So if a person wants to give tzedaka, and a person should give some tzedaka in addition to maaser, in order to fulfill both the custom and to fulfill the mitzvah of tzedaka, and actually it says in the Shulchan Aruch that a person should try to give specifically for tzedaka purposes. A person should try to give what's estimated in today's currency about $600 a year for tzedaka purposes, meaning as part of to best fulfill the biblical obligation of giving tzedakah, which contains, first of all, that you should give tzedakah, and secondly, that you should never deny somebody tzedakah. Somebody comes to ask you, that's also a biblical obligation, never to deny somebody tzedakah. So let's say you were never approached. If you're approached, if you hang around, if you're in a community like Toronto, you never have to struggle for opportunity to give $600 to tzedakah, right? But let's say you lived in a rural place, it says you should at least give 600 to tzedakah, so therefore, this amount you should try to give in addition to maaser. This amount of 600 that fully fulfills the mitzvah of tzedakah in addition to the maaser. There's still a lot of questions. And what time is mincha?
Should wait.
8:15? 8:15, right?
8:15.
So I want to, if we'll start, I just want to take more and more questions, and then right after mincha, we'll be able to just answer a bunch of questions successively. So I know I already got some questions from people, but I'll take, anybody has specific questions.
School payments. Okay, so that we'll talk about that. There's quite a bit of detail in that.
You told is rent or mortgage, but if you take all your utilities, rent, mortgage, etc., it's from, let's say, $1,000, as you told, but it's a really small amount for charity. I think it's from gross have to be. Yeah.
Okay, 1 second. I didn't conclude that that's the way you should do it. I said there is an opinion. But I concluded that you should give of the entire amount, that there is no basic amount exemption. You give from the entire amount.
Yeah.
One question
After
that
tax.
automatically comes here, the first question we have to address, it's not a specific question, is net or gross.
Yeah.
Right, net or gross. Okay, so we're talking about giving the entire amount of income.
Net.
Net or gross.
The consensus is that it's enough to give net income, because let's say there is a portion, let's use our circumstance, we pay in our income, we pay CPP, we pay EI. These are things that the government is taking for our sake. The government is taking this for our sake, at best as an insurance policy, right? But really as a way of making sure that people put away, so to say, an emergency fund for disability, for unemployment, or then a fund for retirement, right? So CPP and EI, the government is taking for your sake. So that's for sure. You should have to give maaser. The only reason why you don't, what?
You give the maaser when you
The
get
only
it.
reason why you don't is because you'll give the maaser when you get it.
When you will get paid.
And we don't have this idea like, you have in CRA rules, you have this rule, let's say that if you have life insurance claim, so you don't pay any tax on the entire life insurance withdrawal. There is no such thing in maaser, that because I paid the maaser up front, because it's after-tax dollars, so therefore, when I make a huge amount on it, eventually I don't pay any amount of that. Right, you understand what I'm saying? Or you have a tax-free savings account, right? Because it's after-tax dollars, a TFSA, right? Because it's after-tax dollars, so therefore I don't pay any taxes later. There is no such concept when it comes to maaser. So therefore, you can defer everything to when I will actually get the money. Now I'm just putting the money away. When I will actually take money out of CPP or out of EI, then you do give maaser on that. So therefore, you can just give maaser on the net portion of the salary now, as long as whatever government benefits the government gives you in cash, right, whether CPP or EI, or for that matter, child benefits, and so on, whatever benefits the government gives you in cash, maaser should be given from. Okay? We'll talk about tuition, and then we're going to address a broader question. What if, right after Mincha, we'll address the broadest question, what if it just doesn't make sense? What if I don't seem to be getting through the month? So before I talk about, what is obligated, what is not obligated, the question is, am I obligated even in principle? Can I give maaser? Where should I pull the money from? So this is a big question we have to address. So right after Mincha, we'll talk about the questions.
There's another question.
No, I
Yeah?
just wanted to ask about advantages, disadvantages, single woman, divorced woman, what that's
So you're saying somebody who's in somebody who's less equipped to give, is there an exemption for that? Yeah, that's the question. So we'll address that later. In what situation is a person generally exempt besides for specific?
Actually, we have a practical question. Then what Holmes says, he's a well-known guy. He says, this year, I actually didn't make any money. Company where I was investing, says, this year I was actually taking money that I have right away, and I live this year for money that I already made.
Mhm.
He says, do I have to give 10%? How do I calculate 10%? I didn't make any money this year. I only ate for what I had. He gave myself the more money. He gave myself the rest. What's another question that I got upset for more than a month?
Let's pray for
Let's
someone.
have a question. No, I mean, Ruba would tell us.
Why?